I think the thing that struck me most last week was the 100 players plus were surveyed by Major League Baseball about which organizations they thought were the best organizations that they might want to play for.
Which they thought were the worst, that they didn't want to play for. They asked their players their thoughts on, some players. And what's interesting is even other MLB players have now commented on these anonymous opinions that have been levied out. I know Nelson Velasquez of the Royals went off on Instagram about what somebody said about Juan Soto. Not that he was wrong, because accusing Soto of being a guy that just hit singles is a very bizarre comment from another player.
From a guy who's going to get a $500 million contract, by the way, or about a guy who's going to get a $500 million contract.
Who's not just a singles hitter.
So, and the idea of who the most overrated players were, that was like, why are we asking these questions?
Because it's interesting.
No, I don't want to have other players like who's the guy I want to diss the most?
I know, that's super fun.
That's horrible. So I think it's bad. I think asking which teams. So I think the Yankees were way down the list of teams you want to play for, and one player's comment was too many rules. So, the whole facial hair thing.
You know that going and playing for the Yankees, there's a whole bunch of extra stuff that's attached to that basically no other franchise has to deal with.
And by the way, the Mets were on the list of teams that more often they didn't want to play for, and I assume they didn't really give any reasons why, but I guess it must say it's a train wreck or something like that.
Well, I think some of the comments were in the past, that especially before Cohen came in, that they were behind on the analytics, and even that when last year when they brought in Scherzer and Verlander, there were still some comments that the Mets were a little bit behind in terms of what they had in for their pitching staff. I think they are trying to get better, but I do think there's that combination with being a New York market team. That it's just like, do I really want to go play for a team where I'm going to be relentlessly nitpicked?
It struck me, though, that with the Yankees and the Mets, the Yankees are a really good team, and the Mets are not a good team at all, but better than the Rockies, the A's. So those are the teams that are like, I don't want to go play for the A's. Well, that would be obvious given the circumstances there.
Well, certainly, and also you have to think about when this poll was being conducted. If these anonymous players were being asked all throughout the middle of May, then the Mets looked like the team you least wanted to touch. Now, over their last 10 games, they're 8-2, and they're playing great. They're playing really good baseball. So it can also just be when in the year you're taking the survey from these guys and who's in the news for not being good.
And they also had a whole misperception aspect on one of the surveys, which was, what do you think fans are most misperceived about when it comes to baseball? And it was stuff like that players aren't working hard, that guys are mailing it in. They had things of that nature.
Right, which is something that we always kind of talk about, ascribing things to a lack of effort rather than a lack of ability is probably something that we do a little bit too often. For instance, we as Met fans, we've been going after Starling Marte and his less than stellar defensive outfield performance, and sometimes it looks like he's just not getting to balls.
And we don't know what's going on, how injured, if there is
a
reason or
but
not.
The idea that he's not getting them because he's not trying or he's not putting in the work, that's just a ridiculous thing. These guys are trying.
And again, are there plays in which guys don't give 100%? Yes, that happens.
Right, but I'm not going to blast. Most of those plays are guys not busting their butt down to first base, which over the course of a season, Brandon Nimmo is an outlier for a reason.
This week also there was talk, and I don't know what you thought about that, with regard to the Olympics in 2028, which is going to be in Los Angeles, and so baseball is talking about coming back. And so the conversation came about that should Major League Baseball take a break and allow its players to play for their country in the Olympics?
If you're trying to position yourself as a global sport, if you're trying to say, no, we're not just about the MLB here in America. We care about the KBO. We care about the NBP. We care about all of these other leagues in South America. Then you're actually more incentivized to take time off for the Olympics to let these players go back and play for their home countries, because that is saying that your country's representation is of equal importance to Major League Baseball as Major League Baseball is. I think that you can't be like, oh, yeah, we're a really global game, but no, you got to stay home. You can't go play in the Olympics.
I think that's a terrific point, and I think particularly when you hear Rob Manfred talking about how they want to take Major League Baseball international, right? Played games in London this year. They're going to play games in Paris, I think, next year.
We all saw how big a success the World Baseball Classic is.
They want to have a European division, right?
And if we're being honest here, you would get a better quality of baseball in the Olympics with all of these guys being in fresh game shape. Now, yes, obviously there is the fear that somebody could get injured in one of these games, but they could get injured playing a regular season game. So I feel like the idea that, like, oh, somebody might get hurt, and we as Met fans can see the pain of what happens when a key guy gets hurt, not even necessarily playing in a World Series Baseball Classic game. But I think that denying the world the opportunity to have a meaningful Olympics, by not letting them play in the Olympics, you basically render that medal pointless also.
I think the World Baseball Classic
To a
last
degree.
year was, such a seminal event in that we're still talking about it. We still remember some of the matchups, Ohtani and Mike Trout, and obviously you mentioned the Edwin Diaz injury. And actually the cool thing about the Olympics is it's 3 years from now that they'll play the next WBC. That's 2026.
Right, so
that 2028 Olympics, that's the off year. That wouldn't be another World Baseball Classic. So, that's another reason why. And could Major League Baseball and the other leagues sort of put time into their schedule between now and they could do it. They could do it.
But it would take everybody to kind of focus in around it to make sure that it works, because Major League Baseball is definitely going to be the one that drags their feet. I think everybody else would kind of need to pressure them into it a little bit.
And I think if this Olympics were not in Los Angeles, it might be a little different. It would be harder to do that in most other places.
Right. It's much easier if it's in the U.S. to do this, because then the teams are like, okay, well, we don't have to send our players over to some foreign country.
They're already here.
They're already here. I'm a little more okay with that.
So, I think that's an interesting question, and I'm going to be really interested to see. And I think you could do something that year and just crush the All-Star game in 2000.
Right.
We don't need to have the All-Star game.
You don't need to have the All-Star game if everybody's playing in the Olympics.
Got like 4 or 5 days that
Right.
you can sort of set aside. This can be done without too much disruption. I mentioned in the Open just about some of the players that have been jettisoned.
A lot of guys DFA'd this week.
So I think the first guy I saw was Kevin Biggio.
Never really put it together up there in Toronto, and by that I mean he was like a career 220 hitter. It felt like for them.
And our Fathers and Sons episode, which comes up next, mentions the Biggios quite prominently.
Right, and Kevin is not a poach.
His dad's a Hall of Famer, and Kevin is obviously not on that track, but he did get picked up almost immediately by the Dodgers, who need help in the infield.
And they would love for them to be the ones that could, in their minds, fix Kevin Biggio. But I think that
fix Kevin Biggio would be, I think what the Dodgers really want is they really want Mookie Betts to play second base and not shortstop. So Kevin Biggio could play shortstop.
But he's a second baseman.
I understand that, but that would be really useful to them if they were able to get him to do that at this point, because I think they're really uncertain in their infield, because no one, Max Muncy or anybody, is playing that great for the Dodger infield right now.
No, that's
true. Why they picked up Biggio. Mm-hmm. Just another body in there. And who else was DFA'd this week? How about, and this was, I was asked about this quite a bit, Jose Abreu. Mm-hmm. Right, of the Astros, who took the demotion from the Astros earlier this year at age, who knows how old he really is, but I think he's 37. But he's from Cuba, so you're never really sure.
Right, he's reported as being 37.
Right. And so he played like 9 years in the Cuban League, starting at age 16, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wait a second. He was playing professional baseball. He's played 71 games as a 16-year-old, as listed. So, there's a part of me that just has a hard time believing this.
Right, which is, not to be.
Anyway, so if he's not 37, he can only be older.
Right.
Right. Now, so why isn't anybody going to pick up Jose Abreu? And our friend Kelly, Franco Troop was asking me, saying, well, why wouldn't anybody want the guy? Because he's old.
Because he's got an OPS plus of 4 this year.
And that would be the other reason. And he's terrible. So
right, he's batting 124 this season and 113 at bats.
No team's going to pick him up at this point.
The only team that would pick him up would be like the White Sox, maybe, hoping to just
because they need players.
Because they just you need a reason for people to show up.
Now, here's the thing. And this is going to hurt you when I tell you this. Okay, so if the Mets were to trade Pete Alonso.
No, they wouldn't.
And then it goes Jose Abreu.
I would rather watch Vientos at first base.
So he's another guy that came in. And then your favorite Daniel Vogelbach was finally DFA'd by the Blue Jays, sent off. And I don't think he has any other prospects to play Major League Baseball. He was as awful this year. Right.
Now, somebody that could be DFA'd soon because of Kevin Biggio is Chris Taylor, who is, people think of him, especially because of those Dodger deep runs, those few years around 2020, as this really good player. He's been dreadful these last couple of seasons.
He is the second longest tenured Dodger after Clayton Kershaw.
Mm-hmm.
which is hard to believe. He's been there. Well, now 2017 is 7 years ago, right? And I think he's from that.
Well, and right. And
group.
we were saying Abreu's OPS plus was 4. Somehow, I don't even know how this is possible. Chris Taylor's is -9.
How do you have a negative?
I don't even know how that works.
So you're costing your team by being on the field,
Right, and it's brutal because he's still owed about $24 million on that contract he signed back in 2022. So I would not be surprised to see him being sent away, especially if they find anything.
He's a
else.
really versatile fielder, though. He can play anywhere. He just can't hit anywhere in the lineup.
Right, that's the problem. You can't. A guy on the team does not. You don't need guys like that anymore.
The Tampa Bay Rays released Harold Ramirez, and it would not necessarily be super notable, except that when I saw that he hit .313 last year and 300 in 2022, so it's not like the guy doesn't hit 300. So what is he doing so bad that would have him say, I don't even care if you, because he's not doing that this year, by the way. That's the first thing, and he has zero pop.
Right, exactly, and that's what you're seeing. That basically these guys that are getting let go, teams just aren't willing to be sentimental anymore. They're just, if you're just literally a black hole, they're just going to get rid of you.
But the Nationals said thank you very much, and they picked up Harold Ramirez here on Saturday. So he's gonna be somebody the Mets are going to see. Another I thought notable thing last week, and it had to do with gambling, and we had a whole discussion the prior week about
and I have
Morinos.
to say, this one should be much more concerning to people just based off of, because this was umpire Pat Hober, who is a umpire a lot of people like. He's renowned for having that perfect World Series game a couple of years ago, was suspended for betting on baseball. Now, in all fairness, Pat has come out and vehemently denied these accusations, and we don't really have any more information at that time other than he's been suspended and he's denying it.
Right. This is different than the Shohei thing because he specifically himself was being called out for doing this.
Right. Not just connected to it.
Right. So he, he's like you said, he had that perfect game in the 2022 World Series.
And
one of the most appreciated umpires in terms of balls and strikes. Figures it wouldn't be Angel Hernandez
or C.B.
Buckner or something like that. It'd be somebody that actually is a good umpire who's got a problem.
So I think the thing that you have to be concerned about is I don't think MLB would suspend him without at least something, because they're not going to go after a union-protected umpire and suspend him for betting on baseball without there being at least something they could substantiate here. Now, I do believe he'll probably be found innocent in the end, but something tells me this isn't them just trumping up a charge for no reason. They got to have something on this guy. You got to be connected to gambling in some fashion.
I think that it's going to have to be something that they know that they can say, well, if they come up with this answer, it's not going to make us look bad,
right? Because
this guy's going to have a real case of defamation if in fact it turns out he wasn't involved at all. A couple players coming back, and we talk a lot about the Yankees here and the Astros, and the Yankees are still playing great, and the Astros still aren't, and the Rangers have sort of turned it on. So Gary,
I think Corey Seager's in the middle of like a 30-game on base streak or something like that.
He is the longest of his career, and Max Scherzer is thrown a couple of rehab starts, so he's going to come back.
Right, you have to be concerned because Verlander was scratched from his start for the Astros today with neck stiffness.
Oh, and they already lost Urquidy.
Right.
They lost Christian Javier. Hunter Brown has never been the pitcher the Astros really hoped he would be. Yeesh.
It kind of feels like a year where the wheels have just fallen off the car, and it doesn't really feel like there's a lot they can do about it.
Could you imagine the Astros being sellers at the All-Star break?
I think
they sell Alex Bregman.
Wouldn't be a bad idea.
Because are they really going to be able to rally and put it together in the playoffs and be what they've been over there?
Not unless you somehow believe all those pitchers come back and are themselves immediately after
or come back, or other pitchers we're not even talking about.
Right.
So, but Garrett Cole's going to come back for the Yankees, and he's looked excellent.
And they're the first 50-win team this season.
Yeah, that's a really good team, and we'd be remiss if we didn't have our weekly discussion of Aaron Judge.
He's down to a .690 slugging percentage. Nobody's finished with above .700 in the last 20 years. He might do it. That's impressive.
The guy is unbelievable, and since like that one moment in early May, he has been. Well, he would have been the best player in baseball for F4.
Well, I think the wild thing the other wild thing about Judge is that he hasn't hit into a double play since I think May 9th, and he still leads the AL in double plays grounded into, which is just insane for how bad his start of the year was.
Well, and also that is nobody in the AL hitting into a double play?
No, I think he just hit into like an insane number of them to start the year.
I don't understand that. So, and you and I were talking about this off air before that, and we had a pretty good discussion about Paul Skeens, because I tried to float out there that rookie pitcher Paul Skeens, he of the 6 major league starts, should be considered for the All-Star game. And you're like, no, he can't. And I think the All-Star game, which is an exhibition, I think we talked about this last week, I think if I was a fan and I wanted to watch the All-Star game, I'd be much more interested in watching the All-Star game if Paul Skeens was pitching in it than some other National League pitcher.
And I don't disagree with you, but he literally doesn't qualify, hasn't pitched enough to qualify in any major statistical category yet.
Right, because he hasn't played enough games as a percentage of his team's
and
games.
He hasn't pitched enough innings yet. So it's like it's really hard for me to put a guy that's barely pitched enough to qualify. He doesn't even qualify. Be like, yeah, but he's really cool, so let's... Now, I think what they should do is that they're going to elect all these guys to the All-Star game. Paul Skeens should not be named one of them. But one of those guys is going to step aside either due to injury or he just doesn't
because
feel
we'd much rather watch Ranger Suarez.
Right. No, but Ranger Suarez deserves the spot.
Yes, he does.
Over
I get
Paul
that.
Skeens. But when Ranger Suarez is like, yeah, my arm's a little tired, I don't feel like pitching in the
Let
All-Star
the kid
game.
pitch.
We'll bring in Paul Skeens because that'll be way more interesting for everybody.
So Skeens has thrown 33 innings in his 6 starts. He's 3-0. He's got 46 strikeouts in those 33 innings, which is super impressive.
He's got a 2.43 ERA.
Right. He's only allowed 9 earned runs. You're right. And if his ERA were eligible, he'd rank 10th in the major leagues. His 12.5 strikeouts per 9 innings would be first in the major leagues.
But that's, especially per 9 innings, when you've pitched as little as he has, I feel like one of the more statistics that could be much more misleading.
Okay, so here's the thing. Here's why Paul Skeens should start the All-Star game. Last week, the Cardinal fans gave him a standing ovation after his first career start at Busch Stadium.
Yeah,
What?
Yeah, I don't know why they're doing
What?
that. Yeah.
That makes no sense at all. So, I think Paul Skeens, is a guy that I'd like to watch pitch.
But now, as good as Paul Skeens was, I don't think he put on the most impressive pitching performance of this week, because that belongs to Rangers reliever David Robertson, who on Wednesday struck out Betts, Ohtani, and Freeman in the 8th in order, and then did it again the next night.
On 11
pitches.
On 11 pitches. On 11 pitches, yeah. So David Robertson had that's like almost like the 1933 All-Star game, like twice in a row when Carl Hubble struck out the 5 Hall of Fame.
Well, I wasn't, because he did it the first time, and I brought it up, and you're like, well, let's see him do it again. And then he goes out and does it again the next night.
And yes, the Rangers ended up winning both of those games, and David Robertson has really helped the Rangers sort of keep touch with the Mariners, who are in first place by quite a bit at the moment, 6 or 7 games.
Now, they're dealing with a Ty France injury. I think they're hoping that it's only going to be a quick trip to like the 15-day IL, maybe, if they even have to put him on the IL. But that's a lineup that we've always been concerned about their ability to score runs, and so if he's going to be missing any kind of serious time, that's definitely a team I could see making a move for some power at first base.
Yeah, and it won't be for Jose Abreu, but I do
No, they would need something, or Daniel Vogelbach.
I do think, and I said this a bunch of times being a Met fan, watching Pete Alonso sort of mope around the field right now for the past couple of weeks. That's a team that could use Pete Alonso.
Right, that very much could happen. And then, just from some stuff from today on Saturday when we record this, Shoto Imanaga, or I guess Mike now.
Mike Imanaga,
had
the second.
Right, had another fantastic start today against the Cardinals as the Cubs beat them. So they've kind of kept on their track. I think the bigger concerning news for another bird team in the Orioles was Kyle Bradish getting put on the 15-day IL with a UCL strain. And I mean, basically,
there's not a lot of pitchers left.
Well, Grayson Rodriguez went today.
Corbin
Burns is going to go tomorrow, and then the Orioles are going to probably find some guy on the street to come in.
How's your arm feeling?
I haven't thrown a pitch in a while, but I'm pretty sure I could get up there and get a few.
I think
over.
anybody who's got an arm coming to the game in Baltimore or wherever they're playing, they're playing home to the Phillies this weekend. So that's going to be something next week when they try to go with guys that they haven't named a starter for 3 games in a row starting next week. Another guy who I think has got a chance to be picked up and has had a really good season, and he played for the Mets a couple of years, is Kevin Pillar.
Oh, yeah, released by the Angels. I think he's definitely the type of guy that...
No, he hasn't been released by the Angels.
Oh,
no.
You're just to be traded?
I'm just saying that he's a guy, I think he's got like an ops plus of like 165 or something.
Oh, okay, yeah. I was wondering why they DFA'd him based on your notes.
No, he didn't DFA him, but he's just a prime suspect. What do the Angels need with Kevin Pillar? He's in his mid-30s. Somebody needs a darn outfielder out there that that can do the kinds of things he can do.
Right. I guess the question is what are they going to give the Angels for a rental of
Angels
Kevin?
will take anything.
Anybody. Yeah, true.
Anything. A guy.
Any young, potentially good.
So that's what they really want. And I think the Orioles are going to obviously struggle with the pitching aspect, but they also got some players on the field, and Cedric Mullins, who is not having a real strong season from a standpoint of playing offense, and the Orioles are struggling a little bit right now, even though they got a game today from the Phillies.
They got a game today from the Phillies, but it's just tough for them because they're looking at the AL East and they're like, we're playing good baseball, but it doesn't really. We
not making up any ground.
We don't make up any ground on the Yankees, and it can be very frustrating to sort of get stuck in that position the whole year.
They're going to make a deal for a pitcher, maybe
they're going to have
maybe
to.
two.
Just because of injury, they're going to have to, and they were especially counting on guys like Means to come back and be a force for them, and there's a good chance that Means just never comes back at all.
Yeah, this is second Tommy John surgery, so I think.
But I will say the concerning thing right now is that if you're a team in the AL West, you have to be thinking, we might kind of have to win the division to get a playoff spot because it's going to be hard to get you're playing for one wild card spot behind the Orioles and right now the Royals, and you're not close to either one of those teams. So
I'm telling you, I'll say it again right now. I do not think the Royals will last.
Well, they're starting to fade a little bit. Carlos Correa has come on strong for the Twins, and the Twins, who were really struggling there for a long time to make up any ground in the AL Central, have really finally started to pull along. And then you got the Tigers, who are kind of just plodding along behind them.
They're falling back a little bit.
They've sort of fallen back a little bit.
And we always talk about, I think, as we finish play here on Saturday today, there's talk all week about the fact how, the National League only has 4 teams above 500. Well, the American League, by the way, as we're right now, has 6. So it's not like they're that much better. So there's just a lot of very mediocre teams.
Now, it could be 7 if the Red Sox win tonight.
Right, for tonight, though.
Right.
And by the time this releases on Monday, who knows if they're going to be back to 500?
We don't know.
Sunday. So I think all we're coming out of this is that there are just a few good teams, and everybody else.
And there's going to be a lot of movers and shakers this year at the deadline. The way you see these wild card races and these divisions shaping up here in the middle of June, it is not how it's going to look in August.
But I think the interesting thing is going to be that they're going to be teams that are going to be sellers that you're like, what? Like we talked about the Astros. Like I could see the Astros go, we don't have any pitchers. We're not, no matter how well we do, if we get into a playoff series, we can't run out, an bunch of Justin Verlander and hoping Framber Valdez can take us through.
You could see that with a team like the Giants. They could sell.
Yeah. Well, they have a lot of kind of assets in Michael Conforto and guys like that.
And they're not really in it. You're thinking, okay, you know what? Why hang on to an already lost season? Let's get some assets
But not
back.
yet. Just like all the teams in the National League, it's only
You're going to have to wait until you get to the trade deadline.
I think you got another 30 days before you can say, this isn't really working out, because between now and then, injuries will happen, so you'll have more definition.
Yeah, and who knows what we're going to – just who knows what the landscape will be. Who goes on a run. If the Mets could play really well the next couple of weeks, all of a sudden they're back above 500. Suddenly we have a different, landscape of the NL wild card.
So that's my question to you. So if in fact you are vying, and let's say Atlanta is the first wild card team in the National League right now, and I believe the Braves, who have played better recently, I think they've won 3 in a row.
Yeah.
They're going to be fine. They'll win enough games that they'll be the first wild card team, I think, unequivocally in the National League. But the rest of the teams, should you really give it all up to try to win the third wild card?
I think it depends on what you're giving up.
Yeah. But if it stops you, what I'm saying is if it stops you from trading assets to a contender that would help make you a much better team next year, just making the playoffs team this year as the third wild card team and doing what the Mets did a couple of years ago and losing in that first series.
Yeah.
Is that worth it?
You make a trade for one of your prospects and you're the Arizona Diamondbacks and you get a World Series appearance.
I think that's what people are thinking. The Phillies have been doing that too.
Exactly.
So it's look, it's getting down to the All-Star game. Things are getting real tight. But I don't think we're going to have any definition on what's happening here for, like I said, another month or so ahead of the trading deadline on July 30th.
Mm-hmm.